Willkommen in einem anderen Aufregens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 13 of my game design series of videos. In this video I'll be providing a brief overview of Ancient's medium battle scale rules, or medium size battle rules. This is my second version of the Ancient Rules review video. To keep these videos to a more manageable size, I've divided them by the size of a battle a player could expect it to play, which is the main difference with my first version of the Ancient Rules. However, I have expanded them out quite a bit, adding additional rules. The Ancients video series breaks up rules based on the size and army a player could be expected to command and come home in a day. The classifications I'll use is skirmish battles, rules which cover skirmish or warband size conflicts, small battles, rules which can only support smaller battles about 4,000 per side, medium-sized battles, rules which can support most classical battles but not the largest, about 12,500 per side, any historical battle, rules which support a scale which can support battles up to the size of Carnet, or if the rules support a variable scale which can support battles of any size. In this video I'll be covering medium-sized battles, common in medieval periods and part of the ancient periods. A typical army size would be 10,000 to a maximum of 25,000 per side, which covers most battles except the largest. This scale represents the current sweet spot for many sets of commonly used rules today, although there has been a recent trend for new rules to support even larger battles. Perhaps in the next 10 years we'll be experiencing another WRG 7th edition scale jump. I'm really uncertain of this, but you never know, it could occur. In order to complete a game in a reasonable time period, each side should really consist of no more than 50 elements. As an element scale of about 256 men per infantry element, this means the player can command an ancient army of 12,800 men within a 2 to 4 hour period. Larger forces can be commanded, but this requires more time to complete a game. While the earliest rules used a much smaller scale, the advent of WRG 7th edition increased the size of forces, historical forces, a player could command. This trend continued, and this scale has become the most popular, at least today, in the Ancients era. WRG 7th edition represented a total rewrite of the original WRG 6th edition rules. From the 1st to the 6th there was a constant evolutionary path, but 7th represented more of a revolutionary change, I would say, especially scale. The biggest change is the scale. Players can now command armies up to 20,000 men per ease. To accommodate this, the ground scale changes and the time scale has been set to a reasonable 15 minutes per game turn. This results in smaller units and no sub-units, but now we have commands which are controlled by sub-generals. The terrain deployment system was significantly expanded and many other pre-game rules modified. One major game mechanic change was the formalization of the sequence of play. The phases remained simultaneous but was now broken up into more specific phases, sort of mimicking a sequential sequence of play. The changes ran throughout the entire rules, but the basic rules game system kind of remained much the same, so would be familiar to 6th edition players. In 1993, DBM was published, and this represented a true revolutionary mainstream figure gaming rules from WRG. These rules are clearly a development of the DBA game system rules, but designed to provide the same level of detail and complexity of WRG's 7th edition. It uses a PIP system, and its combat system is similar to DBA. Orders and reaction tests are done away with, and casualties are now taken in single and are not taken in single figures anymore. The sequence of play is a pure I go, you go sequential system, with only combat being simultaneous, as this is required to obtain a final result. The troop type and classifications have been totally revamped and updated, and a full set of new army list books were published to support these rules. The rules contain more examples, and while it was difficult to learn the rules, once you are familiar with the rules, it was reasonably easy to cross-reference the rules during the game. Its major issue were gamey tactics and unclear rules, and several versions ending with 3.4 were made available to overcome a lot of these issues, but they never really fully solved them. I like these rules, but I have to admit these were not simple or easy rules to learn and play. Unless you can constantly play using these rules, you will forget important critical rules, and it's rather difficult to teach new players. In 1997, DBM version 2 was published. I lack a copy, but my understanding was that it was not a major change, but represented another evolutionary update. Version 1 went through a number of reprints, at least a total of 3. So this version represents all the changes consolidated into coherent and revamped form. As far as I can work out, there was no significant game system changes, just lots of minor corrections. In 2000, DBM version 3 was published, followed by version 3.1, which may have just been an errata sheet, and then 3.2 in April 2011. Version 3 represents another rewrite. However, as far as I can work out, the game system mechanics remain much the same, just the rules were rewritten. Some of the changes were clarifications concerning knight exceptions, cavalry, blades exceptions, and a host of minor errata. The version 3.2 amendment sheet was 14 pages in length. There were 2 more sets of amendment sheets titled 3.3 and 3.4, which were published. 3.4 being published in 2020, so is rather recent. 3.3 was published in 2018. Phalanx is a free set of rules which allow you to, in theory, reproduce historical battles. In the figure gaming world, this is a bit unusual and represents a new design focus. The army is divided into wings, normally 3 or 4, each of which needs to be activated to move and engage in combat. Command points come from generals, and if not activated, a wing can still conduct some action based on a random die roll. Shooting is conducted against enemy forces, which move into contact with friendly forces. Shooting can cause the enemy to halt, be repulsed, or broken. For melee combat, which occurs between wings, or vignettes, which includes their commander and their troop types as well as what troops they are facing. Apply any additional modifiers and compare the opposing combat factors. Now throw d6, cross-reference the difference, and the result can be a stand, repulse, or break for the entire wing. This is very much an attempt to allow players to reproduce large historical conflicts, and as such has a high degree of abstraction. The rules are supported by a separate army list, and the whole package is very professional and usable, but doesn't seem to have gained that much traction. In March 2007, DBMM version 1 was published. I'm not going to go into the details or the politics behind this, as I personally believe it would have been much more sensible to simply create a DBM version 4 instead of creating a whole new set of rules. Nonetheless, that is what has occurred. The note states DBMM was a drastic change. New game elements were added such as stratagem, but the real difference between DBMM and DBM was subtle but nonetheless significant. DBM has the same sort of outcome table as DBA. When a unit wins, depending on the matchup and margin of victory, the unit may be pushed back or destroyed. DBMM takes this a step further by adding outcomes based on whose turn it is. Example, a unit attacking, that is fighting in the owning player's turn, might be able to destroy the defender on a simple victory, depending on the matchup, unit grade and other factors. The same unit that is defending, that is in the other player's turn, might only be able to push back the attacking units. I was a DBM player and was not too keen about DBMM when it first came out, but I must admit it is the more popular set of rules, and now I consider it as a very good set of rules, if not better than DBM. However, both rules have the same issue: difficulty in learning and complexity. ADLG was published in 2008, and then another version in 2021, that is version 4, was released. These ancient rules have become very popular, possibly being the most popular set of ancient rules in the UK in the recent years, and certainly in Europe. I unfortunately lack a copy, so my analysis of the rules will be basic. A typical ADLGL game will take between 2 to 2.5 hours to complete and will require between 20 and 30 elements per side. Elements are based in accordance with the DBX/FOG format, except that medium heavy foot units will need to be double based. Combat is relatively straightforward, with each opposing pair of elements rolling a single die and applying various modifiers for unit type, terrain and situation. The high rolling element is deemed to be the victor, and the lower rolling element is deemed to be the loser. These rules are simpler than DBM or DBMM, easier to learn, and games are quicker to play, so these rules are ideal for competition games, which could be why they're so popular with competition players in the UK and even in Europe today. These are the rules I would consider purchasing if I was a new player, but as the type of players I have to game with prefer much simpler games, I'll probably stay with rules such as Lost Battle or P17CW for now. Beginner players basically don't like particularly complex rules. However, anyone interested in entering this hobby would be best to start with these rules. In 2010, version 2 of DBMM was published, followed by version 2.1 in 2016. The changes include a Edge of the World section, the movement of the baggage effect section, addition of army lists at the end, as well as incorporating all the version 1 errata. Version 2.1 is the latest update to the DBMM rules. It features several rules refinements and now covers the period 3000 BC to 1525 AD. Included in this edition for the first time is a selection of army lists to help new players to get started quickly. Version 2 does have changes, but to me it looks more like an evolutionary change than anything really significant. If you do wish to play DBMM, you do need the latest version, as the changes are subtle and scattered throughout the rules. Version 2.1 has even less changes than version 2.0, but once again, in order to have a game, you do need to purchase the latest rules, no matter how few changes there may be in it. Coupled with version 2, which has a revamped set of army lists, which may have been the main reason this version came out. The army lists are excellent publications, and even if you do not use DBMM, are well worth buying. Triumph is a miniatures wargame covering the ancient and medieval period up to about AD 1500. These rules are aimed at the quick play gamer and could be compared with DBA, although you typically feel a lot more elements, at least according to the army list. A typical force mix is 24 points, which would allow you to field a maximum of 29 elements, but probably closer to 20 elements per side. The rules do support larger conflicts, but I'm uncertain how this is done. Triumph looks like it's more complex than DBA, and possibly less so than ADLG, so fits into a possible sweet spot. One of the best features of the rules is the online army list, called Meshwesh. The army list database, known as Meshwesh, is freely available online. While most of the ancient rules covered in this video are focused on competition play, there are always players interested in duplicating historical battles as well. This requires rules which allow for larger scale, which has occurred when WRG 7th edition came out. The resulting scale became very popular indeed, as it allows players to refight a range of historical battles that they were unable to do so before, while still retaining the interesting micro detail of different troop types. The other trend in terms of this scale was a move away from reaction test and a move to a more command control system of restricting what a player could do, which I mentioned in my last video as well. The other interesting trend in this scale was a move away from the old multi-element unit to a more element-based gaming. Players moved elements around rather than units, and while they could still form units, the units were ad hoc. This was another WRG-initiated trend which proved highly popular. The final trend in this scale was a trend towards a more fluid combat system where elements in melee would be pushed back or pushed forward until someone breaks or is eliminated. The advantage of this was once engaged, the battle would adopt the feeling of a real ancient battles, assuming we really understand what that even means. Once again, this was a trend which reached its peak in DBMM, and quite frankly, I liked the feel of it, and I liked the trend, and it proved extremely popular as well. And so we come to an end of my episode 15 of my video on game system design, which in this case provides an overview of ancient medium-sized battle scale figure gaming rules. Alle guten Dinge kommen zu einem Ende.